You're listening to the Cooking from Scratch podcast. Are you trying to eat more protein but constantly feel like you're fighting an uphill battle against your own cravings? If so, you're definitely not alone, and today's episode is specifically for you. We're going to unravel the mystery of hyper-palatable foods and how they can undermine even the best intention when it comes to high protein eating. I'm excited to welcome Reshanda Yates, who will share her expertise on how to use mindful eating strategies to overcome these cravings and reclaim your power over your plate. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Aaliyah Iden, and with over 15 years of cooking in professional kitchens and at home for my family, this is the first non-cooking cooking podcast that shares how to make cooking easier so you can feel inspired and motivated to cook in the midst of your busy life. We go behind the scenes and tap into the stories and inspirations of chefs, farmers, and others working with food to reveal what they're up to in their kitchen right now and what their favorite at-home dish is to cook from scratch. This is the Cooking from Scratch podcast. It's the beginning of 2025, and this year I've refocused the podcast and I'm leaning more into the healing aspect of homemade meals. A couple of years ago, I started eating high protein meals, which resolved some health issues I was having. Then this fall, I started a cooking membership for high protein eaters to share my favorite recipes and meal plans that I developed to help others on the same journey. When you tune into these episodes, you'll hear from health and fitness coaches and healers about the role and benefits of high protein eating. Stay tuned for more. All right, I'm here with Reshanda Yates, who is a mindful eating coach, and I invited her on the podcast today to talk to me about food cravings, the addictive qualities of foods, what I call hyper-palatable foods. And I'm really excited to have her on. You have a podcast. You said it has over 50,000 downloads. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
What's the name of it
Correct.
again?
It's called the Rise and Align with Food podcast.
Rise and Align with Food podcast. That's awesome. I need to go listen to some episodes. We're in the same business group, so that's how I found you. But I'm looking forward to having an expert on here. Can you tell people a little bit more about what you do as a mindful eating coach?
Absolutely. So I always like to start with why I became a mindful eating coach. And that is because about 10 years ago, I was struggling with binge compulsive eating. So I basically would have described myself like I felt totally out of control with my eating. I would, and it was like this flip a coin kind of situation where I would eat really, really healthy during the day. And then at night, it was like a switch would flip. And then I would find myself kind of zoning out, just eating like so much food and then sort of coming to and realizing what I had ate. So it was almost like this out of body experience that I was experiencing. And then I would feel um, shamed. I would feel a lot of shame and guilt and I felt a lot of frustration. So going through that experience and finding my way out of that experience is what brought me to being a mindful eating coach. And what I have discovered is that when you build just a particular set of skills and tools, you can really just retrain yourself to respond to cravings and food and the environment in a new way.
Mm,
And so what I do is I help women to do the same thing.
got it. That makes a lot of sense. So you're building an awareness for people. You're kind of helping people step back and see what's happening with them, is what I'm hearing. Because maybe they're not even aware that they're doing what you just described. Maybe that's their situation, but we become so unaware of our choices and what we're doing on a day to day, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like it
Yeah.
very much for me was a very automatic reaction. And it was like the awareness was really all these layers of an onion, is kind of how I describe it. of like becoming aware of like, okay, like I'm doing this because I feel this way. And then becoming aware of like what those feelings even are, you know.
Yeah.
And as we're going to be talking about today, what part of that awareness is what's happening in the world around me, you know, because I was the kind of person who I used to really struggle with, for example, certain foods like Oreos, for example. And that's something I hear a lot of, a lot of people talk about Oreos specifically.
That's
So, and I'm
funny.
sure we'll get into a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I would feel like, okay, I if I eat an Oreo, I'm gonna eat 10 Oreos, you know? And I got so frustrated about this. Like, why can't I just eat one cookie and
Hmm.
stop? You know,
Hmm.
if I want to allow myself a treat, why can't I just stop?
Yeah.
And so it was like becoming aware of like not only what was happening inside of me, but also what was happening in that food. But also there's this other piece of like the psychological component, which is encompassed in like marketing and, you know, and they're all interrelated. So
Yeah.
really becoming aware of multiple layers of this too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll just start with why I wanted to have you on. So I help people, I have a high protein cooking membership, right? So women
Hmm.
over 40 who are interested in eating more protein, we all hear, oh, it's better to eat more protein. And as a chef, I come at it from very much fun and flavor perspective, and I've started eating that way. So I started thinking about ways that people could possibly have difficulty with changing the way that they're eating, or um, what obstacles they would have to eating more protein. And one of the ones that came up was I thought about, oh, I can't stop eating the thing I don't want to eat, right? That I'm not supposed to be eating, whether it
Yeah.
be just unhealthy food or cookies or crackers, or whatever it was that in that unhealthy category. And then I started thinking about, and I haven't read a ton about this, but about hyper-palatable foods and about how these processed foods that are created so that they basically hijack our brain, right? And that we
Yes.
can't help but crave them. And I think one of
Yes.
my big messages for people is like, it's not your fault. It's not about your willpower. And I think that's what you're talking about a lot too, is the shame and the guilt that we get stuck in. And we don't even realize all these factors at play, some of which you just mentioned. Like it's cultural, it's psychological, it's chemical. I mean, I guess what I'm talking about
Yep.
is very chemical, right?
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you bring up the point about willpower
Yeah.
and the part about hijacking your brain. Because, yes, I mean, it is an intentional, conscious choice to engineer foods so that you can't stop eating them. Like, that is on purpose. And when I first learned about this, it actually angered me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of the biggest fuel for me to really learn how to navigate this world. And I've talked about before how, in my opinion, it is a very hostile world, especially for people who are vulnerable to overeating, which is a
Yeah.
large percentage of the population.
Yeah.
When you look at the research, within women, it's like 65%. Like, I think it was like, well, I might have that percentage wrong,
That's
but
okay.
it's a high percentage,
Yeah.
okay, of women um, who have identified with feeling like they
Mm-hmm.
don't have a handle on their eating.
Right. Right. So let's go back a little bit. What is a hyperpalatable food for people who are like, what in the heck are they talking about? Like, what does that mean? Can you
Yes.
describe that?
So absolutely. So basically it is what we've been talking about. It's just food that's been engineered so that it makes you want to eat more and more and more and more of it. It's it's typically very easy to consume. And so it is engineered with a certain combination, like they figure out like how much salt and fat and
Yeah.
sugar is usually a big part of this process, but they manipulate the food in such a way where when it touches your tongue, it sends signals to your brain that cause you to desire to keep eating the food. So they have this term called snackability, which is like it's
Oh,
actually a
wow.
scientific term that they use, that food engineers use to get your food to make you want to snack and just keep going back, right? Um, it comes down, I mean, the things that they focus on, down to the dust on the Doritos or the dust on the Cheetos.
Right.
Because what happens is when you lick your fingers
Mm,
to get the dust off of your fingers,
yeah.
that plays a role in making you want to eat more.
Oh my
The
God.
stimulation of your tongue on the finger, it's just crazy.
Totally.
And their budgets, oh my God, like, so I feel like we can't talk about this without talking about marketing as well.
Yeah,
Because all of
absolutely.
this is centered absolutely in marketing and getting you to buy. It's all profit driven.
Yeah.
And so a ton of their marketing budget is spent on research so they could dissect down to the nth degree what will make you reach back into the bag. How can they make that food? Another one more thing I'll bring up is layering. So we get bored if we're just like, if you eat
Mm,
a chicken breast, right, you're going to
yeah.
come to a point where you're like, okay, I've had enough chicken breast, right?
Right.
But if you bite into like a Snickers bar, you've
Right.
got a layer of nougat, you've got a layer of nuts, you've got a layer of caramel, you've got a layer of, I think they even put a little saltiness in there. So
Yeah.
every time you take a bite, it's like your brain is thinking, oh, this is a new experience that I'm
Mhm.
having, right? Which makes you want to finish the Snicker bar. So they're very, very conscious of what they're doing. And so that's
Mhm.
why it makes me so mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of the reason why I'm so passionate about this.
Yeah.
And that's basically hyper palatable food in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we've come to expect our food to entertain us, right? Like it's not enough to just eat. It has to somehow be fun or like what you're talking about. You want to have to reach back in that bag for that next bite. And I mean, honestly, okay, I know it's awful, but I also know it's ingenious because our brain is working the way it's meant to, right? Like back in hunter gatherer days, we wanted more sugar for more energy, right? It was really so
Right.
for survival. So what they're doing is they're tapping into the way that our brain works for
Hmm.
survival, knowing that we need this salt and this fat and the sugar, and they're using it against us, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, is really
Yeah.
what's going on, right? Because if you're
This is
also
why
unaware of
hijack.
this, yeah, this is the definition
Perfect word. Hmm.
of hijacking for sure. Yeah, so many different. So, and I'm never going to look at that word snackability the same again. I'm never like, wow, snackability. That's what that means. That means we've hijacked your brain so you can't stop eating it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I think this might lead to the next question. You know, in our food diet culture, we have a lot of fear of like fat and sugar and salt,
Hmm.
especially. Oh my God. Whenever I add salt to a dish on a cooking video, people in the comments like freak out every time. They're like, salt. And I'm like, a little bit of salt. Like, it's okay. You need to make food taste good, you know?
Yeah.
But so where is that balance between like too much salt is bad, too much sugar, too much fat, or is it a combo of all of them? Like, what's the difference between that hyper-palatable Cheeto and something that's crunchy, salty, and cheesy that's a normal food, a
Mm.
non-processed food?
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so yeah, and I want to address this in two different sections. So the first thing is the fear part, which I can relate a lot to, because
Mhm.
fear of, it's like it's almost like when you start having more awareness about stuff, then that's when it's like your fear gets activated because you're like, oh my God, look, what am I putting into my body? What is this going to cause this disease? Am I going to be able to manage this? Am I going to be able to control myself around this food or
Yeah.
whatever the fear is that's coming up? And that was me. I was just like so anxious around food. And then you have, like, I had gotten to a point where I was just so mentally focused. My mind was just spinning on food constantly, trying to manage it inside my head, trying to keep track of everything, trying to stop myself from eating certain things, and just always anxious and worried. about what I
Yeah.
was eating,
Yeah.
which is no way to live. It's
No.
like by the time, if you can eke out every single little health benefit from your food, but you are miserable, what's the point?
Yeah, what
Right?
I know. Exactly. Totally.
And yeah. And so, you talked about like, what is that balance? And I actually don't think it's, either this type of food or that type of food.
Right.
I really think it's a yes and approach, which is kind of
Mhm.
like my philosophy in life. I'm always looking to find ways to, like you said, have balance. So I'm looking for ways that I can know that I'm making the most empowered choices for myself and enjoy indulgences in moderation.
Right.
And I also want all of this to feel free. I don't want to feel like I'm micromanaging myself. I don't want to feel like it's this, experience of just contraction and restriction.
Yeah.
And so that's one part of it, right? And that's really more of like really understanding how your body responds to different foods. You can, when you're eating, you can be mindful, and your mindfulness activates a part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, which allows you then to actually be in the experience, not being hijacked by the food that you're eating. So
Hmm.
that's one part of it. Another thing you mentioned is, well, what's the difference between like if I cook with, if I cook a whole food based meal for myself
Right.
and I add a little salt and I cook with some fat, and I might use sugar
Right.
in or maybe a little honey in a stir fry sauce or whatever. Like,
Right.
what's the difference between that and what they do in, a bag of Cheetos or Doritos or whatever?
Right.
And the difference is the processing, the process. It's
Right.
the process that, when we're cooking in our homes, it is not the same as when scientists are figuring out how to chemically engineer a product to activate a specific reward pathway in our brains. Is not equivalent to each other.
Yeah.
So now the discussion about like how much salt you should be eating and things like that, that's not my lane. I'm very
Right.
clear, like my lane is really about like how to, once you have the information of like how you want to eat, how to get yourself on that path.
Right.
But just, comparing, it's not even comparable.
Yeah.
Comparing like a bag of Doritos
Right.
to some chicken breast with some salt is just not
Right. Yeah.
comparable.
Yeah. No, I
That
know.
chicken
It's
breast
so
that you
true.
eat, yeah, it's going to activate. There's a few things that are happening when you eat whole foods. So, and I don't want to open up a whole different can of worms, but in a nutshell, what's happening when you eat whole foods is you're activating pathways in your body that lead to satiety, that lead to, well, I guess we could just really stop it there, satiety,
I
because
was
that's
just gonna say
really
that. Like that's the thing, right? You're crunching away on those chips, but you're not necessarily ever satisfied by them, which is why you keep crunching
exactly
away on those chips until you
right.
just can't take it anymore, or you fall asleep, or the bag's empty. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
seems to be your choices.
Right.
Yeah.
And another thing I was going to mention is there's actually research that shows, and I would have to go back to the article. I can't remember what the citation is, but that when we eat um, foods that are truly satisfying, we don't just get the dopamine hit. So, like when you eat, a hyper palatable food like a candy bar or something, you do get a dopamine hit from that.
Right. Hey there, Cooking from Scratch podcast listeners. If you've been paying attention to previous episodes, you know that health is one of my biggest motivators for cooking. When I started eating high protein meals a couple of years ago, it gave me more energy and resolved other health issues I was having. This, in turn, inspired me to start sharing the recipes and meal plans I created using my 17 plus years of experience as a chef and recipe blogger with other health conscious eaters. If you're on the high protein meal train, or even if you're just curious about it, listen up because I have something that will help you eliminate the guesswork from high protein eating and easily hit 30 grams of protein at every meal. In my new free masterclass, 5 Simple Steps to Master Your High Protein Meals, you'll discover why wasting time and energy on hours of meal prep is not the answer and what you need to do instead to always have a craveable high protein meal at your fingertips. In addition, you'll also discover the most important changes you can make now to end meal decision fatigue and how to easily hit 30 grams of high quality animal protein at every meal without feeling stressed or overwhelmed. When you tune into this no-cost masterclass, you'll walk away feeling confident that you are on track to hit your health goals. And for all who attend this live free training, you'll get a free copy of my 4-day high protein meal plan, as well as the opportunity to join my high protein meals membership for high protein eaters. Now, all who registered for this no-cost class will receive a replay, but you're going to want to do your best to tune in live because the high-protein meal plan that's full of incredible chef-created meals that take less than 30 minutes to make will only be available to those who attend live. To save your spot for this free training, go to www.soulspacechef.com/class. Again, that's soulspacechef.com/class, and I can't wait to see you there. Now, back to the episode.
But with foods that are actually satiating, you get a second dopamine hit that's in your stomach.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and so that's like a signal that, okay, I'm done eating. Like I'm
Right.
satisfied. I've gotten what I needed. So they're just not comparable at all.
Yeah, that is such great information. What do you think about the term everything in moderation? I've come to kind of have a different outlook on it because people tend to group everything in moderation, meaning everything, like your junk food and your whole foods. So if you're eating everything in moderation, how is that junk food not taking over your brain, right? So in a way, saying that doesn't really work, right? I mean, people, I think, say that, in
Mm.
my opinion, with not an understanding of how our brain does get hijacked. People say, oh, everything in
Yeah,
moderation, and you can use it as like, you don't realize you're addicted to the cookie or the sugar or whatever it may be, you know? And that's really what brought
that's
me to
true.
looking for somebody to talk about this because I think maybe I fall back on that a lot as an excuse from eating something that I know isn't the best, going to make me feel the best. And I'm like, well, everything in moderation. And the next thing you know, I'm like, well, what's moderation? I
Okay.
mean, what the hell does that even
Okay.
mean?
I get what you're
And then with
saying.
this
So
other
yeah,
added thing of like, oh, and my brain might be being hijacked. So there's like really no such thing as moderation happening. So do you have an opinion about that term or
that expression is just too general. It's
right?
just not nuanced enough.
Yeah.
It's yeah, if somebody is just saying it as like a blanket way
Mhm.
of eating, it's just not enough context,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you don't know. Let me back up a bit. So the approach that I take is that everybody has their own unique goals, values. Everybody has a different situation in life, right? So we always have to take the context into consideration. And when it comes to eating everything in moderation, what I do, I say, um, indulgences. I indulge in moderation.
Mm.
But when I first started down this path, that was not an option for me. As you said, like I didn't have enough awareness, I didn't have enough skills, I didn't have enough tools at the very beginning to be able to do that, which is why I do sort of come out against this thing. I don't know if you've heard of it called intuitive eating,
I've
because
not heard of
I
it.
personally feel that it does, I've seen it personally do more harm than good.
Mhm.
Not only in my own life, but in, the lives of like my students. And I just personally feel that you can get to a point of eating intuitively. You just have to have the skills. You have to have that practice under your belt, right? Um, I'm trying to think of a metaphor for this right now, but nothing's coming to mind. But something, I'll just give you one of the things that I tell my students when they're first starting out, because I work with a specific population of women who tend to struggle with like binge eating, overeating, compulsive overeating, things like that.
Yeah.
And when they're first starting out, they don't trust themselves enough, which honestly, they don't have any reason to trust themselves right now, because
Mm-hmm.
they see what they're doing to their bodies. They see that they're not eating in alignment with what they want to be doing, which is eating
Mm-hmm.
healthy. And so you have to build that trust over time. It's kind of like being with a partner. You don't just trust them with everything right out of the gate. You wouldn't like
Mm-hmm.
give somebody your bank account information on the first date, right?
Right,
But when
right.
you build that trust over time, and say you're married or you have this 10-year partnership or whatever, then you do that. So it's the same way when it comes to discovering how you can really be eating indulgences in moderation and still be eating healthy on a regular basis. I tell my students to use the yes and method.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all based on my philosophy of looking for ways to add things to your diet that are going to support you versus focusing on, oh, I got to take this away, I got to take that away.
Mm-hmm.
And so an example of this would be like last night, actually, I had pizza for
Mm-hmm.
dinner.
Mm-hmm.
But just because I had pizza for dinner doesn't mean that I can't still eat, some broccoli, a salad. It doesn't mean I'm going to be all or nothing.
Right.
And so this is a way that I find it's a really simple way to start taking steps toward starting to get that balance, because at first you might be eating, like, depending on the person, 80% junk and
Right.
only 20% health nutritious foods.
Right.
But you can start bringing those nutritious foods balance gradually up, and then
Mm-hmm.
to maybe you're 50-50. But then over time, you're going to start to notice, with the right tools and skills, right? You're going to
Mm-hmm.
start to notice, oh, these foods make me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm starting to finally crave more of these nutritious foods.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to notice that when I eat these foods, I feel crappy for the next 24
Mm-hmm.
hours or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to really, you can start to get um your reward pathways to be more in alignment with what you want to be doing on a regular
Right.
basis.
Yeah.
That can happen.
Yeah. That makes so
Yeah.
much sense. I feel really vindicated right now because that's how I tell my students or my members to add more protein, is to just add more protein, and it pushes the other stuff aside, right? So you put protein on
Yeah,
your plate
yeah.
first. I'm always like, about the size of your hand to start with. Let's start there, and then you can fill in with the other things. But it's not, like you said, it's not about restricting, it's about adding more of the thing you want,
Yeah.
because it's
That's
important,
how.
that
And it
mindset.
feels more abundant that way. It feels more like
Yes.
you're not, stopping yourself or controlling yourself.
Yeah. 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 It's so true. It's so true. I love this Instagram post that you had. It was just so beautiful because it encapsulated how I think about food. It was a while ago, but it said, your food is not just fuel and it's not just fun. And then you had this list of what food is, and it was nourishment, fun, celebrating culture, creativity, nostalgia, energy. And I was like, yes, this is what it is. I think that that's why it can be tricky, because food brings up so many different things for so many different people that it's
Mm.
hard to just pinpoint exactly how to change the way that you want to eat if that's a goal of yours, right? For me, a big part of it is culture. I have a lot of cultural foods. We'll say coffee, for example. I'm half Turkish. Giving up coffee because of health reasons has been one of the biggest struggles of my life, because I have emotional
Mm.
attachment to it from being a kid. I have like cultural emotional attachment from being Turkish. There's so many things that I've really had to come to terms with, like, okay, can you give up coffee? And
Mm.
the answer was absolutely not, never. I'd rather die. And then I really had to realize, like, wow, this is making me feel not good. This too
Mm.
much caffeine, too much, especially coffee caffeine. And it's been a really gradual becoming more truthful with myself about how I'm really feeling when I do
Mm.
have the certain, it's not a food, it's a drink, but not just glossing over that part where I feel like a total spaz because I've had too much coffee. Even though it tastes amazing and the smell makes me so happy and all of it, when I'm a spaz, it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't make up for it, you know? And I
And I've
think
had
that
Turkish coffee. It's good.
oh, so good. I mean, I just love coffee, and I used to make it for my dad when I was a kid. Like, there's just so many emotional things that I recognize in it that I wasn't ready to give it up.
Yeah.
But now I don't give it up. I just drink less of it now, and I smell a lot of it.
Yeah.
I really like the smell of it.
Yeah. The smell of coffee is
Oh my
just so
gosh,
like I feel like even non-coffee drinkers admit that it smells
it
really good.
smells so good, doesn't it?
And I
I
could
know.
just sniff. Yeah. I
Yeah,
could sip all day. You do
yeah,
bring up something that I think is a really good point though, is like, the being a coffee drinker,
yeah.
it's like such an identity
That too.
piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember a few years ago realizing it, like really thinking about that, like, oh my gosh, like me thinking that I'm a coffee drinker is an identity and it's a habit. It's a habit that I've formed into my identity. And it really blew my mind to think about like, huh, what if I just gave up coffee? And I actually did stop drinking coffee for a while,
Mm-hmm.
just to see what that would feel like,
Right. Right.
And it was a really interesting experiment to go through
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I'd say because I think part of it's ritual too. I think there's a
Oh
huge part
yeah.
of food, right, that's ritual. And then when we don't have that ritual, it's attached to our identity.
Hmm.
Like, who am I without this food, or who am I without this thing that I do every day? Coffee's
Right.
comforting. It's warm, smells good. I
Hmm.
love that. I love that. Oh, is there anything else you want to add about addictive foods, or how can people get a hold of you if they want to work with you? If they're noticing
Oh, well,
maybe
people can check out, yeah, they can check out my podcast for sure, the Rise and Decline with Food podcast. I'm on Instagram at Reshanda Yates. And I guess what I would leave people with is just that, if you feel like um, you know, certain foods are hijacking you, um, and you can't stop eating them, recognize that there is a path forward where you can totally feel in control with that food. And it all just starts with being more aware. So I would say, like, I would love to leave people with one tip, which is just, next time, like, say, for example, you struggle with overeating Oreos, um, try being super, super present while you're eating it. And you'll be surprised. Like, when you're super, super present, very aware, and you just sit there and eat the Oreo very, very slowly, for example, again, it comes back to your prefrontal cortex coming back online, and you can start to taste everything that's in that cookie. Like, you'll be surprised. Like, people actually start tasting the chemicals in them,
ah, so
and then they
less
become
good, definitely.
right. And then you become
Yeah,
like naturally disenchanted with it, which
yeah,
is an internal incentive to stop.
yeah,
So that's the tip, the little nugget. I love to leave people with at least one actionable nugget. So
yes.
that's what I'll leave out with today.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to this episode from start to finish. If you have any questions or comments about what was shared, please click on the link at the top of the show notes to send us a note. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and share this episode with your friends.